Half a decade ago, I talked about a little known German developed strategy game from 2002, Soldiers of Anarchy. I wasn't very good at the game and subsequently didn't make a very good video of it, assuming that some publishing house would pick it up soon enough. For whatever reason, this didn't happen, spurring me on to play it again and make another video, hoping to garner it some well-deserved recognition as a messy, albeit in-depth and highly unique RTS experience that remains largely unparalleled. Silver-style entertainment made a bunch of adventure games and post-apocalyptic dystopias, the latter of which were greatly inspired by Fallout and Jagged Alliance. Much like other talented and overly ambitious European devs, the plethora of issues handicapped their games too many times, placing all of them in obscurity. The Fall, Last Days of Gaia, was a solid to great RPG I've talked about before, and Soldiers of Anarchy, now 20 years old, largely holds up and remains worth playing. As usual of forgotten Eurojank, playing Soldiers of Anarchy seems impossible. The exe is either flagged as malware or launching the game brings up a CD key I just couldn't overcome. After that, you need the official patch containing essential bug fixes and game mechanics to actually finish the game. Fortunately, the Russian archiving site allgames.ru has everything there to get it running well on Windows 10. No idea about the Shadowplay symbol sticking out there. I'd rather recommend something like GOG or Zoom platform so no one cries to me about getting a Trojan, but it's been 6 years since the last video, and nothing changed, so who cares at this point? Beginning in 2015, a decade after a mysterious pandemic wiped out civilization, you control a small military attaché emerging from an isolated bunker, yearning only for answers and hope that humanity survived. The intro definitely hammers home the desperation your squad feels, more so when it's revealed that gangs rule the world. You spend the first few missions establishing a proper base, wiping out petty militias and slavers, before searching for answers to the pandemic. I think this whole early section of the game's narrative is decent, with plenty of mystery, rumours of horrific monsters, and option to ally with different factions. That's until the halfway mark, when it gets stupid. Suddenly there's the paramilitary scientific NOAA organization versus a bunch of religious cultists that are creating super mutant soldiers. If this sounds like an amalgamation of the Brotherhood of Steel versus the Master Enclave, you'd be right, including picking sides for alternate endings. Having important plot revelations dependent on the ending you choose is pretty nice, but there's very little characterization of anyone. No real personalities outside your starting squad mates' backgrounds. Conversations and banter is solely absent. They all have different face models yet share the same voice actor or actress in the cutscenes. Oddly, the devs suddenly switched to seemingly worse actors in the last few missions. Speaking of, the voice acting ranges from competent to laughably bad.
Who are you? The next gang come to take everything I own? Well, you're out of luck. The slingers were already here. There's nothing left.
It's still engaging enough for the briefings and exposition, and they actually recorded the same lines for male and female actors. Soldiers of Anarchy's plot, disappointingly devolving into a cheesy mishmash of post-apocalyptic tropes, doesn't ruin the commendable tone and presentation. Set somewhere in Eastern Europe, the ample forests, villages, hilltops and military outposts, alongside the muted greens and browns, function well. There's many survivors you can encounter off the beaten track to fill in the setting further. The world feels appropriately neglected and decaying, far removed from apocalyptic chaos, instead just left to be absorbed by nature. Part of this is undermined when you start fighting through some inexplicable desert city and a giant monastery with homing mines, although these are the exceptions. The music is fairly reserved to background ambience or to establish the tone, sampling plenty of droning sirens, drums, and other percussion pieces. It's nice stuff, keeping the environments tense and unnerving. For 2002, the graphics were decent for the time, well ahead of most lower budget titles. There's lots of polish here regarding the models, textures, and effects. The scale of the maps are great, comparable to ground control, yet can feel underused with lots of empty space, occasionally interrupted by wild animals. Soldiers of Anarchy shipped with the campaign, multiplayer, and custom editor for user levels. While the multiplayer is possibly functionable and there are a handful of maps you can mess around on, I'd rather focus on the campaign. Consisting of roughly 9 missions, you control a small squad supported by various weapons, items, and vehicles to complete a range of linear objectives spread across massive maps. These are the usual tasks seen in ample modern military strategy games: secure enemy outposts, eliminate hostiles, protect allies, and defend strongpoints. The difference is that you're given great freedom in how you carry out these jobs. You're able to traverse the terrain easily on foot and can bring a host of firepower to bear, from small arms to light vehicles, heavy armor, artillery, and aircraft. each featuring different weapons and ammo types for greater effectiveness. Friendly units are few in number and pretty vulnerable as stiff enemy forces and their tendency of reinforcements converging once they're loaded demonstrates. Employing smart tactics, be they ambushes, traps, and combined assaults, are essential to overcome the much larger opposition. In this way, it's comparable to an early Men of War or Soldiers Heroes of World War II if you're a massive dork. Controlling units is superficially easy. You click and they move. The right mouse button opens a command wheel with stances they can take and the actions they can perform. You have to hover the cursor over items and machines if you want to use them. However, there's no formations or speed adjustments. They kind of just cluster together. You can stealth bypassing guards and stage ambushes. However, the only silent weapon is the very rare crossbow, limiting tactics to proning and blazing away. Your troops can use any weapon and vehicle, and are further specialized for certain weapons and equipment like medkits or sniper rifles. This is a good idea, but undercooked. You can only do this once they level up, maybe a couple times at best, and certain skills like explosives are almost essential, enabling you to demine and set bombs. New troops are picked up from story events or side missions. It's certainly not a large roster, well under 24. Vehicles are much more complex. Not only do they need a couple crew members to be combat effective, ammunition is mostly unreplenishable, nor are they repairable in-game. Cars, trucks, and APCs are your usual troop ammunition carriers, sharing similar ammo types, while tanks and helicopters use a variety of different shells and missile types, from armor-piercing, high explosive, and guided. This can really influence clashes between enemy armor, which usually outnumber your own. The patched version of the game allows you to select what ammunition is used. It's really fucking annoying seeing perfectly good rounds wasted on infantry or accidental friendly fire. Managing aircraft is odd in that helicopters function as you'd imagine, although the small ammo pools and sluggishness in hauling troops around makes them better as scouts than anything else. Airplanes function as off-map support, striking at targets you've planted transponders at. It's a cool addition, except the manual deployment of the transponders and delay time reduces their utility alongside very limited munitions. There's maybe a handful of bombs in the entire game. Combat is usually satisfying thanks to the large environments, allowing space to maneuver and place troops, various routes to take, destructibility of buildings, and variety of enemy forces that keeps the game challenging throughout. There's solid replay value to be had in attempting stages again with a different loadout and approach that you just don't see in other strategy games. Unfortunately, a lack of feedback from absent characteristic unit voices and reserved battle music downplays the intensity, where a poorly executed shootout can handicap your entire plan. Not that you'll face too much tactical challenge, NPCs mostly charge your position, and as long as you're not overwhelmed and just stay prone and have enough ammo, you'll handily win. The real difficulty and complexity of SOA stems from it properly incorporating strategy and tactics in a dynamic way. Between each mission, you'll spend time at your base getting briefed on objectives and enemy types, refitting your troops and vehicles, performing upgrades and maintenance on them, and trading goods. Each section of the base, the laboratory, garage, and hangar, have a set allocated amount of time you spend, increasing over the course of the campaign, replacing resource points you'd see in other titles. You won't have enough time to fix every vehicle or give all your troops HRT meds, making them stronger, at least until the last mission, so you have to be selective. Always make sure to turn off the automatic tab, otherwise next time you finish a mission, all your time is instantly used up on stupid shit, completely fucking you over. The singularly largest component of base management is the barter economy to restock your forces. Since currency is non-existent, it's down to listing items scrounged from the levels and then swapping them for other items. The range available includes ammunition, weapons, armor, medkits, grenades, explosives, cars, tanks, and aircraft. The Seeker merchants will tell you how persuaded they are by the deal, which may become harder depending on how generous or miserly you've been towards them prior. Your base's inventory is limitless, so looting the environments is hugely beneficial to have the highest bargaining ability. Late game demands a well-maintained and armed roster of soldiers and vehicles, reinforced further by skills and upgrades, making balancing available time, resources, and manpower very intricate. Be prepared to spend upwards of half an hour exchanging ammo and vehicles before carefully doling it out to your troops. This leads into the persistent scavenging mechanics. I complained in my older video about SOA's difficulty, except mastering this is the gulf between scraping by with a few AKs or riding an M1A1 into a firefight. and it's such an appealing and satisfying system. Everything you pick up or drive can be traded away later, and there's ample loot in the maps, with crates of supplies and special vehicles tucked away, rewarding further exploration. While items such as guns and medkits can be easily collected off fallen enemies, capturing enemy armoured vehicles diverges a bit. Depending on the weapon or shell type used, you may kill the crew without destroying the vehicle, allowing you to seize it. The easiest way I found was using the lighter armed BMP to hit enemies and then stopping once immobilized. You'll want to do this as much as possible, since even highly damaged gear can be sold, repaired, or hold ammo that can be reallocated. Soldiers of Anarchy can be really hard depending on how you recognize scrap as currency. Playing it straight, you'll be unable to refit between missions and afford better weapons, making the late game nigh impossible. It's not unlike Homeworld, where you'd spend half the mission just capturing enemies instead of fighting them. Absent the scavenging, the game becomes a lot worse. One endgame mission has you exploring a desert city without any equipment or vehicles. The 180 setting causes such severe whiplash, it makes the whole game look worse as you spend an hour figuring out the objectives and balk stealthing. To win requires scumming out the enemy AI with explosives, finding weapons, and figuring out however the fuck the alert system works. There's a few big issues in SOA's gameplay mechanics that greatly undermines their functionality and overall fun. Firstly, there's still notable delay in unit reaction and pathfinding, assumingly from the map size, basically screwing the AI. The patch greatly relieves some of this alongside adding a pause and play feature, yet you'll witness countless botched assaults and maneuvers due to the AI not responding fast enough. Then there's a low camera level and lack of alerts when either you're attacked or spot enemies. The minimap and ability to freeze the game alleviates this a bit. It's still very hard to respond quickly enough before being surprised and losing troops. There's also a few smaller issues that will really fucking irritate you, like the overly small inventory and ammunition capacity that makes your soldiers useless halfway through a gunfight and then afterward awkwardly transfer items to them. Your own vehicle crew are susceptible to dying with no notification despite the vehicle being otherwise fine. Frequently, you'll win an encounter only to realize you've lost essential personnel and have to reload a couple of saves. Your strategies and resource system is greatly undermined by a tight soldier deployment cap of 10. This prevents you from using any more than 3 or 4 vehicles for any mission and what you're able to scavenge back to base. Levels being upwards an hour or 2 each makes it untenable to lose any more than 1 or 2 soldiers. You'll leave behind a heap of effectively unusable personnel and equipment at your base that you either trade away or ignore, as upskilling is too slow to warrant deploying fresh troops. It's not like XCOM where you can send low-level grunts into quick missions to build them up and buy new ones. If you lose half your forces by the halfway point, you're soft-locked. The overall point I'm trying to get to is that you're going to micromanage every unit like hell and save scumming when not. There's just no reasonable alternative to this pace breaking unless you're going Iron Man mode, or well aware of what the maps contain, and then you can easily plan ahead, bringing in the right weapons, drawing enemies into kill zones, and picking up the scrap to use later. But it's this difficulty that makes it so satisfying, building up your ramshackle platoon into a proper fighting force and grasping the various mechanics to finally win. Soldiers of Anarchy is, and I guess was, always dated regarding its UI, graphics, and technical features. At 20 years old, it's the mechanics and presentation remaining fresh and rewarding that makes the game highly replayable and memorable in its genre. I'm glad I went back again, at least to not suck as much and give it a proper shape. Working almost seamlessly on 2 different Windows 10 machines should make a broader re-release simple, likely only held back by an unfair lack of interest. Hopefully, it's not going to stay at my 2 reviews and a handful of guides that remember this RTS gem, whose concepts I'd love to see further built upon.